One of the things I think I may have mentioned that I'm a vice president of the Faculty Senate. What that makes me so fortunate to do is that every week I get to have a meeting with the other officers of the Faculty Senate and the provost discussing various things. And then every month we have a Senate meeting. And yesterday, one of the things we were discussing was whether the institution ought to adopt a required vaccination um, plan policy. Some institutions are saying that if you want to attend on campus, then you need to be vaccinated. Like you have to show that you've been vaccinated for tuberculosis, I think. I think that's what the requirement is. So what do you guys think?
Are you talking about like a COVID passport type thing,
No, I think it would be
or
more,
tuberculosis?
I mean, yes, that would be one way to do it, but I think we're thinking more of doing it like the current vaccination policy is for tuberculosis, which is that before, when you are admitted as a student, at some point you have to go provide a copy of your vaccination records to HR and human resources. And the difference is between, I mean, one thing about the passport is it's more public, so it's you know, which maybe gets at this HIPAA violation. Some people are thinking. Um, and the other thing about doing it as a like the current thing is that it makes it consistent with previous policy and doesn't make it a new kind of thing. It's just adding on another vaccination that you're required to show. So um, Aaliyah and Morgan, you're on the on-campus programs, right? So do you recall bringing proof of your vaccination before when you first came? Do you recall receiving bringing your proof of vaccination to the campus to prove that you'd been vaccinated for tuberculosis? I think it's tuberculosis.
I think it's the uh, MMR.
Oh, it's the
Uh,
measles, mumps, rubella. Okay.
yeah, and diphtheria, I think, is what they mainly require. I had to provide mine like years ago, as part of the admissions process.
Yeah.
I mean, before they would, before they would say everything's in order to be admitted, that was
Right.
one of the prerequisites.
So if you're a online only campus student, then you don't have to do that. But um, they assume that you'll never show up on campus, I guess. Anyway, so the idea would be to add it to the vaccinations that you have to do to come back to, you know, basically the same office would administer it in the same way. So what do you think? Do you think a school should do that?
Well, the school may have to. I mean, uh, some people are going to have to be required because, I mean, to keep all of us safe.
And I guess it would apply probably to faculty as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So do we think we should so the big question, and if this is the rhetorical question that came up, is it's probable that the legislature is going to pass a thing that says we cannot do that because of well, you guys, without me saying, probably all know why. And so the big question was a rhetorical question. Should we make a stand about this at the, faculty senate passed something? And even though we know that it's not, it will be either overruled by the Board of Trustees or overruled by the legislature, and may, in fact, subject us to some kind of penalty. So the question is, is it appropriate to make a stand on some issues, even if you know your audience is going to, some part of your audience will not accept it?
Well, that's part of the voice of the people. I mean, that's important.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
regardless of what the legislature does and how they decide, I mean, the voice of the people is always important.
yeah. So I'm not going to ask you to say what you believe is right, but after class, if you want to email me your thoughts on this, it'd be interesting for me to hear, about it. Another issue that came up yesterday at my executive committee meeting was triggered by Anna. It's her fault. And
does it have to do with online classes? I feel like
it does. It has to do with creating a synchronous section of online class. So when I was advising Anna, she said she'd really like to take, we were looking at the requirement for another language. You have to take some language courses in, and one option for the language course is to take linguistics. Have you all taken your language requirement? Other than, so the English department is offering grammar, syntax, and morphology, a linguistics course. It is being offered as a 991 section, meaning it's not available to somebody who is in the online campus, but it is being offered, and it is being offered synchronously. So I asked the English department if they would be willing to I asked the teacher if he would be willing to add a 9U1 section to it that would also be synchronous. And so it would not change his workload. It just is a matter of section title. But the English department, but his chair would not allow him to do that because he believes, because he says the university policy is that 9U sections cannot be synchronous. And so, in the meantime, I think Heidi Harris was advising some other students also in the online campus who also got interested in taking that course. So there's like 4 or 5 or 6 people. Are you aware of these other people, Anna? You're just nodding.
no, but
Because, I mean, if you're a writing major,
fun.
that seems like a reasonable course to take. So the policy, the official policy of the university is that if you're in the online campus, you are not online campus classes. If you're in the online classes campus, you have to take 9U sections. And the official policy is that 9U sections can't be synchronous. Because, I don't know. So what do you think of that policy? Now, Jay, you're in the online, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so
I'm just sort of neutral about that. It doesn't seem appealing to make it like a hard rule that it they can't be, as long as there's an asynchronous option, like you do. I mean, because there's a lot to be gained from the synchronous portion of a class. I mean, this is the first time I've been able to participate in synchronously in an online class. I've never had another instructor that's done this, and this is like,
And that's because of this policy. But the English,
oh,
but my department, rhetoric and writing, has really, because of Joyce Carter, our chair. She came from a university that offered many synchronous online courses. That was the model. She kind of convinced us, and then of course COVID. So prior to COVID, I just was not interested in this, the synchronous online model. I thought I wouldn't like it, and so I just never tried it. And because of COVID, I was pushed into that, and so that's why I'm doing this. And so now I'd like to be able to offer continue to do it.
Yeah, because it turns out you're really good at it, and it's great.
Well, and one of the things people have told me, my colleagues, is that in my asynchronous courses, somehow my personality doesn't come through. And so it seems like I'm meaner than I mean to sound. Which is all a little, I mean, we worry about these things as teachers. And I it's something to worry about. Anyway, so that's one of the things. Anyway, so I have started a battle on our campus, and we blame Anna.
Really interested in that class, and you're just like, well, I can ask if they can make it, and I'm like, oh, really? And I didn't know it would like turn.
Well, and I was so surprised when the chair said, no, we can't. And so I'll show you, actually, let me show you why he won't. And I believe they've added this policy recently because I've started talking about this. And it's not really clear to me who wrote this. And the thing that's why it's a Senate issue is that faculty are supposed to have pedagogical control over the classes. So if I want to be able to teach a class synchronously, I should be allowed to teach the class synchronously. But let's see, it's not this page. Maybe it's this. No, home.
Like, I guess I just think that like an online class could be either, like it could be asynchronous or synchronous. Like it can still work as long as it's like both options are available, since some students may not be able to attend.
Well, and I would go further and say that even if you don't have an asynchronous option one semester, you can always have it the other next semester. And so you can reasonably offer alternate. So did I see Colleen just log in? So Colleen's been doing mostly asynchronously.
Yeah, and today's my last class with you guys. I'm starting a new job Monday.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
it's good that we have the asynchronous option.
Yes.
I told people that I don't really want to do it asynchronously again, because I feel like you guys in the asynchronous group, I don't want to do it asynchronously at the same time as doing it synchronously. What I want to do is alternate between semesters that are synchronous and asynchronous. And some of these synchronous semesters might be actually in the classroom once we get back to the classroom.
So are you saying that you don't want to do a hybrid class like this?
Right, because I feel like the asynchronous students are not getting a very good experience. You don't have to respond to that, Colleen. But I feel like you're you know, I don't have the time and effort and resources or energy to do both in the full way that they should. And so I feel like you're always second, poor cousins. I made this system of the quizzes to make sure everybody watches it, and then I added a little extra quiz within the quiz.
I like the last question at the form, the Google form.
Yeah.
Because then that way, if I wasn't there, which I'm not most of the time, I can still the questions I need to ask.
Right.
It's really going to come in handy with the new job.
Yeah. Well, and there are 5 people who never are able to come. So, anyway, I just feel it's not a fair system, but that's me. And it's also the first time I ever did it. So maybe, the next time I did it, I'd do better at integrating the 2 different groups. I guess I can't find this policy. That's okay. We'll stop sharing. Anyway, I think what it currently says is all U classes have to be asynchronous, except if you request an exception, and you have to go all the way up to the very top level of the university to get these exceptions. And what my argument is that we should frame it not that all online campus students are asynchronous, but rather there must be a pathway to take all required courses in an asynchronous manner, and that you can offer them synchronously, but you need to have a plan to offer them either simultaneously or in the next semester asynchronously. So like I'm teaching 4301 again in the fall, it's going to be purely asynchronous, which is how I did it last fall, purely asynchronous. So
I've got a question. Would it be possible to maybe include video lectures in an asynchronous class? Because that's something else that I haven't. I've only had one other teacher that's included videos in the class structure, and it really adds a lot to what the students get from the class.
Yeah, I agree, because like it can kind of help feel like you're still getting a lecture and you can still kind of know who the professor is, and it's not just like, here's the assignment and the reading, goodbye.
Yeah, and this is why this whole pandemic is such, in so many ways it's turned out to be a really good thing. So this thing, these lectures that I gave you, or these little videos I gave you, one of them was this writing good sentences videos. This guy.
Hi folks, welcome back. Now in the last lecture I talked about words.
And I think I may have put the wrong thing in the quiz and not mentioned this. So I do hope everybody watched it. If you didn't, I recommend that you go back and watch it. So it turned out this guy has been doing 20, 30-minute lectures for his online class for the last 10 years. And what is his name? Anyway, I wandered around and looked at his YouTube video channel, and basically what they say in the online instruction world, they are learning objects that he has created. So he's created these learning objects that he can put into classes for various things. So like this lecture about writing good sentences, he can put in any class where it's, you know, relevant to be putting into it. He happens to be a little bit of a weird guy. But and as I was wandering around looking at him, he turns out to be an expert on writing and analyzing video games, which is why I gave you the information about him, of his podcasts and some of the courses he teaches. So he teaches the rhetoric of video games and the rhetoric of pop culture and stuff like that. So he really seems like a person that might be interesting to several of you, since you're so all interested in video games. And you might even, I mean, he apparently teaches online, so you might even want to investigate whether there, you know, you could be a guest student, visiting student in a class of his sometime. Anyway, so I just thought I'd bring that up. And so Jay, the answer is yes, and that is definitely where I am moving, where a lot of people are trying to move, and it's all because of the pandemic that kind of encouraged us to start thinking, you know, about these options. So,
And one thing you could do, it would be, you know, speaking of options, is to kind of keep as much interactivity as possible. You could have a recorded video lecture, and then have a discussion board, or something like that, or a Facebook page that, for discussion, or if you wanted it outside of Blackboard.
I used to always want it outside of Blackboard, but I've conceded and come back into Blackboard. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And so for the fall, I'm going to try to do that. So I'm going to be teaching an asynchronous version of 4301, and I'm going to try to create, you know, do some videos. My challenge is keeping them short. And I've been doing that also with my other two classes. My other two classes are purely asynchronous. And so I've been making videos. In fact, this afternoon I'm going to finish one for the 3316 class I'm teaching on using the databases in the library, which it's just not possible to learn how to use databases in the library if without kind of an interactive watching somebody do it. Now, what I've been doing is I scour the YouTube videos and try to find good ones out there, which is what I did with the this week's all those style things. So I saw a lot of really bad things about style.
You know, another good resource may be Khan Academy. They've got a lot of good instructional videos.
That's right. I've totally forgotten about that. And I bet they would have had something about Richard Lanham, which I'm going to talk about today.
Do you guys know the name of that one app where you do like video flips? I did it for History of the English Language with Dr. Ecke.
Oh, I remember that. We were in the same class. It was Flipgrid.
Flipgrid, yeah, that'd be great for async.
And what
Yeah,
what do
because
you do?
okay, like you do like a short video, it's like a flip, it's called. It's like under 5 minutes, and then you have your students respond with a 30-second or 1 minute long flip instead of a discussion board, and that's what Dr. Eki had us do.
Oh, so then they respond with their own 30 seconds comment.
Mhm.
Oh,
And
yeah.
students can respond to each other too.
Pardon?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Students can
Students
respond
can
to each other, she
respond.
said. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very user friendly.
Okay. Yeah,
Cool.
that sounds really good. And there's a there's also a quiz tool that people use. Actually, this teacher used. Um, Ed Puzzle. Has anybody seen that? So it's another kind of interactive thing that basically sets up little quizzes in between, so that enables you to document they're involved, and then they have to do something. And so I'm going to look at that, but I'm going to look at Flipgrid too. Thank you for those suggestions. Let's see how I want to do this. All right, so in talking about style, it struck me that my favorite kind of advice for style is from Richard Lanneman, The Parametric Method. So I'm going to talk a little bit, or we're going to work on that a little bit, but actually first we're going to talk about the structure test. And by the time we get through that, we may not get to parametric method. So, but we can at least make an attempt. So, just to remind you where we are in the schedule. The quiz on style will be ready tomorrow. And so I had originally had these drafts of the analysis or opinion paper due for Sunday, but I thought, well, since you're also supposedly working on the quiz, that let's change that. So instead, it's moved to Tuesday. And now everybody understands what I'm asking. I'm asking you to pick one of those two things and just really polish it up, do the normal thing with writing classes, and then we will have peer review. So I want you to get it to me by Tuesday night. Then I will spend Wednesday making sure that everybody has turned it in and we can create peer groups.
I've got a question on
Yeah.
that. You the schedule I think said that it's due for sharing. Did you want us to like just adjust the sharing settings so that anyone with the link can access it? And then how exactly did you want us to
Well, I
submit?
want you just submit it to me,
Uh-huh.
and then because I don't know, I will make because I have been learning this semester that that if I try to set up the groups ahead of time, we end up with so much time wasted if somebody turns anything in late. So I'm only going to be setting up peer things if people have actually submitted it to me. And so once I ask you to submit it to me, then during Wednesday, I will be setting you up into pairs or trios, probably. and then I'll tell you who to share it with.
Okay.
I may even share it, and I will. You raise a really important point. It's always a challenge getting sharing settings right for classes. Um, and especially if people have Google, their private Google accounts, that they might have worked in. But that's a great question. And so then we'll talk about feedback and revision on Monday. Then we'll do the peer review. Then you have a week to do peer review and, final May 2nd. I think I also may set up some kind of individual meetings. This is all in line of this issue of, trying to get everybody more, so I'm more connected. There are a few people in the class I've never talked to, so it's funny because I've taught asynchronously for 12 years, and it's the comparison, I guess, that's going on.
I've got a question.
Yes.
On the final version that's due in at the first part of May, I'm guessing that we're supposed to revise again after we share. Would
Yeah.
that be something that
Yes. Yeah.
would that be something that you would kind of approach with us in that individual meeting that you're talking about? So the revision that we need to make?
Yeah, so I'll give you feedback as well. But
Yeah.
you guys are all advanced writing students. You can rely on feedback from each other.
Okay.
So I mean, I will definitely be giving you feedback, and but I really hope you get good feedback from each other as well. Because
Okay.
since you're all advanced, it's different when it's a comp class or something, and they say, I don't know what to, whatever.
Well, it's good that you emphasize that, and we can take more responsibility toward doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about I guess I should call that the test. I may not have had the settings right so that you could see your results.
Mhm.
Did you guys see your results?
Not yet. I'm afraid to look.
I
Oh,
don't think I was. I mean, I checked a while
okay.
back, but I don't.
So nobody tried to see the results?
Not yet. I am now.
Okay. All right. Well, so I think they weren't really available for you to see because I don't think I had it set up right. But they are now available for you to see. I double checked by giving my test student a grade. And the way to get them is you click on, so I went into my grades. And you click on the test itself, and then you get a report like this. It's late because I did it this morning. And you click on the grade, and you find the grade for everything. And I just kind of so I didn't actually answer any of the questions. I just put stuff there. But this is what you'll get, how many points you got. And if you didn't look at that for the other ones, you should make sure I have that set up too. Blackboard they provide so many different options for how you can display the results that it's kind of hard for me to figure it out. Anyway, so I want to talk about the exam. So I already talked a little bit about qualitative progression. The idea behind qualitative progression, it's not the same word as quality, the stasis of quality. And I did give you a trick question to ask you that, and some people fell for the trick. Qualitative progression has to do with sense of organizing that's sort of more moods, associations, thoughts, as opposed to a real sense of logical. And it's probably, as I said, less likely in written arguments because of the linearity. But when we start talking about non-written or non-spoken rhetoric, visual arguments, musical arguments, it's probably more likely how it's structured. And then that issue of presence, which was also in one of the short answer things, it's really a idea of how you focus on something, how you get somebody to pay attention to something. And that continues to be a question people have been asking on the class quiz, and a lot of times they say, well, is it what your focus is, or is it what you want people to pay attention to? And I'll say yes. I mean, it's just basically how do you use structure to get your point, the important points across. One of the traditional things is, and Aristotle himself said it, he said, put your most important reason last, because that's what they're going to remember. And if you're doing a straight argument with reasons. And so that's an example of using your structure to create presence, to put the energy somewhere. So some of the other short answer questions I wanted to talk a little bit about. There is a difference between syllogistic form and the syllogism. So the syllogism is the logical form that philosophers have developed for describing deductive reasoning. And one of the things that Aristotle says is that the syllogism is good for philosophy, but for rhetoric, we need to use the enthymeme, to remember back to what we were talking about a bunch of weeks ago. And his point was that, well, partly that rhetoric is not always purely logical. You're constantly thinking about your audience and what will work with your audience. And that may or may not fit into a official deductive syllogism. And our textbook talks a lot about the presentational argument versus the sort of deep structure argument. And so there may be this underlying syllogism to an argument, but you don't necessarily present it as a syllogism, you present it in these enthymemes that you're dealing with. And those enthymemes have reduced elements. That's that whole point of the enthymeme being a reduced syllogism, because you don't always have to say everything, or you can assume something or you can hide something. I mean, that's one of the other principal ideas of the syllogism. So the syllogism is this logical three-part structure that philosophers use, and certainly writers can use as a way of making sure you understand what your argument is. But most rhetoric itself doesn't present syllogisms. It presents rhetoric. And so syllogistic form is not actual syllogisms. What it is giving the sense that you are following a logical linear progression, that it is that you're going step by step. And really, in many ways, Obama is, I mean, he's such a logical speaker. His tone is always logical. He never got really emotional. He just says, and he stops at each point, after every phrase. And I really think that, and it's counteracted to the qualitative progression, which is much more free-flowing and, kind of over here and there. So that's a point that some people seem to miss. On the psychology of form question, what I wanted to hear was some recognition that the text structures the audience's response. That's the basic idea behind psychology of form, that we were thinking about not so much how the text is organizing, what's here, but how what's here structures the audience response. And you're talking about how, this is first, and that creates an expectation that's next, and that creates an expectation that's next. And so the key terms kind of I was looking for was, how it structures the audience response, setting up and fulfilling expectations, which can be overall, the overall arc of some piece, which you see specifically in mysteries, where that, and a Law and Order that starts with a dead body and sets up an expectation that by the end you'll know who killed it. And
was that the question about psychology of form?
Yes.
Okay.
The classical template question, and I should say about all of these, I wasn't really asking you about your opinion, whether you liked these things or didn't, although it's fine to talk about whether you liked each of the examples that I had you do. We're trying to use our analytical approach just so that we could say how could we analyze this looking at the form. I can't remember if this is my link. Okay. So, and you can take a look at this later, more detail. And there are a lot of ways to go about analyzing this Katie Hill piece, using the template, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not asking for you to do the same way that I did it, but just to think about how you might look at it. And the key point about thinking about something in the classical template is thinking about what each of these sections do. So sometimes we think about organization in terms of what a section of a piece that we're writing, what the content is. But what this is asking you to do is think about not so much the content of that section, but what the section is doing in terms of the sort of movement of the argument, whatever that is. Which again gets back to the psychology of form, that it's not so much content being structured in a order, but rather this interaction between writer and reader that's being structured. So the whole idea behind the exordium is to introduce, or we also talked in an earlier class about how insinuating is another way. But, attract attention, all the things that we've thought about with introductions before. So, they're trying, they get a kind of a clever opening line. And since this is a newspaper editorial, they use short paragraphs appropriate for this genre. To no one's surprise, Katie Hill is back. And so it's kind of interesting and appealing. Now, if you don't know who Katie Hill is, you may, well, then in fact, the whole set up a question and set up expectations and then fulfill those expectations actually may work, or you may just decide not to read it at all if it weren't for a class. And I know a bunch of you said in the answer that you'd never heard of Katie Hill before. And I'll tell you that the reason why I know this piece, or I don't know this particular article, but the whole reason why I know anything about Katie Hill is because last semester one of the students analyzed her last speech to Congress where she resigned. And I, prior to that, knew nothing about it. But so here's the exordium, then the narration. The narration is telling the story. Well, it's very helpful in this particular case, if you don't know who Katie Hill was, that you get a background to who Katie Hill is. So this narration section is providing necessary background, which they do. The once promising Democratic Congresswoman from Santa Clarita who turned a red district blue in 2018, but then resigned a year later after nude pictures of her and a female campaign aide were linked to the media, never said that she would fade quietly into obscurity. Any of you who've ever taken journalism classes know how you're supposed to get all the 5 W's into your lead sentence, and they have done that in this narration sentence that summarizes her story. Never said she would fade quietly into obscurity. And then we get in the next paragraphs an update of the narration of the history. Quite the contrary, she's blah, blah, blah. She wasn't kidding. 10 months later, she released a memoir. Then this week it was announced that she had sold the memoir and that Elizabeth Moss would star. Well, I thought that was interesting. Oh, and there's a podcast, Naked Politics with Katie Hill. What's the tone of this editorial or column, let's say? At least at this point. Does he like Katie Hill?
No.
No, it does not come up. He's pretty sarcastic. It's the old American story, get in trouble, parlay it into more money and more fame. Good work, Katie. And in case you didn't get the point, you get the point there. So here's the history. It not only tells the story of Katie Hill, very briefly but compactly, but enough detail so that you get it. It also gives you a clue to his point of view. Then the partition, and I had you read Cicero's actual stuff about the classical structure, which is kind of challenging to read, but he says you can use the partition to preview what's to happen, or you can kind of use it as what I consider a turn. Like, you've talked about the old, the sort of the known information, and now you're moving forward. And in this case, I think there's kind of a turn in attitude, So, and why shouldn't she? She's got her side of the story to tell. a reputation to rebuild, a life to live. She's only 33 years old, and no doubt a lot of people are interested. I mean, she had a pretty intense year. After all, this is not just a news story that popularized the word throuple, it's also high political drama. So his attitude's getting a little bit better. If you're curious what Hill has to say, just check out her book title. So it's more history, more background. To be sure, she says she regrets her mistakes, having had an appropriate relationship with a staffer, but she also says that the relationship fell into a gray area because it was consensual. She calls herself a victim. So he's getting back a little to his sarcasm. And then at this point, whoops. Her version, however, is just her version. Not everyone agrees. Now, this also is really rebuttal as well. But I also see it as proof as to talking about sort of the different points of view of Katie Hill, which turns out to be his main point. And then his whole point is that there are multiple ways to evaluate Katie Hill, and so what's the truth? Does her relationship with the campaign staffer fall into a gray area because it was consensual? So his real point is, how should we evaluate Katie Hill and what she did? And we have more of this rebuttal and proof all interwoven. And then finally, we have his conclusion. My take is pretty straightforward. People, including public officials, can engage in whatever consensual, non-harmful behavior they want, document on camera if they choose. But this should be pretty obvious right now. People shouldn't be having sexual relationships. So this is his real point. And it's pretty clear that he does not think that the fact that this relationship predated her election exonerates her. But then we get to the conclusion, with luck, when the film is made, she will be portrayed not as a brave hero and not as a villain, but as an imperfect person trying to make her way through a complicated world like the rest of us. For that, I have sympathy. So, if you talked a little about some of the concepts and said where you saw it, that was fine. And then finally, repetitive form. I want to remind you, repetitive form is not about repetition of words, although there may be repetitions of words. But again, it's more about repetition of elements of the form. So, and that applies to that issue of parallelism that we talked about a little bit briefly, or that was introduced a little bit briefly last week. Questions about the test? Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit about Richard Lanham, and we probably won't get to talk about it as much. We'll talk about it some more next on Monday. How many of you have been introduced to this idea, perhaps in 3301?
Yeah, I remember the terminology. I don't really remember the concept.
Yeah, that's why it's good to sometimes return. When I was looking for videos, I came across Tammy Scaife for a 3301 class doing a little lecture on it. So it came up in my, just open-ended search on this. the paramedic method, and he is using this metaphor of the paramedic in there intentionally, is basically a way to get language more concise and clear and with less verbiage. And I'm going to start with this video. This is the middle one, because this is Richard Lanham himself talking. And this video was made in the 70s. I guess that's as big.
In revising prose, you've read about what has come to be the dominant prose style in contemporary, a style we've called the official style. You've also had some practice in a quick emergency revision procedure, the paramedic method, or PM.
Is it loud enough for you to hear?
Not really.
Not really. I don't know what I've done. I mean, all my settings.
Your screencasting isn't picking up the audio from the source. It's picking up the room audio.
Right. Which means that I need to go into Zoom and stop sharing.
What do you use for screen capture? Just out of curiosity.
I'm just doing Zoom.
Okay.
I think it's streaming Zoom. So I need to shift to same as system. Hello?
We can hear you.
Yeah. Well, and I know you can always hear me. My son, who is home from college and even taking a test right now, so I need to be quiet, is always saying I'm too loud.
In this lesson, we're going to use TV graphics to show you how the PM works.
It's not really
First,
any louder.
let's review both the official style and the PM. Then we'll put them into collision. The official style has been around a long time. It is the native language of bureaucracy and always has been. No self-respecting civil servant in ancient Rome, for example, would ask for a bribe. Of course not. But a guest present, a sportula, or little basket would certainly oil the bureaucratic machinery.
That helped.
A provincial Greek bureaucrat living in the Egyptian town of Oxyrhynchus several centuries before Christ would write not, "I live in Oxyrhynchus," but "I am a resident of that most splendid of splendid towns, Oxyrhynchus." And the grain tax he extorted from the peasants was called the Happy Shipment, much as our own Atomic Energy Commission at one time rechristened the standard measurement of deadly atomic radiation a sunshine unit. Such oily, nervy euphemism characterizes the official style from the beginning until yesterday's newspaper, which reports multimodal interface as a new name for a bus station with a bicycle rack, or reconstruction of community infrastructure for the repair of a cinder block wall. Bureaucrats are people who put a face on things. And for the official stylist, impersonality comes as naturally as fancy names for plain objects. Never say, "I think he's an idiot," or "I fired him," but rather, Appropriate action was initiated on the basis of systematic discussion, indicating that the termination process would be appropriate. First, put everything in the passive voice, not I decided, but it was decided by me. And then get the me out and let the action float in an impersonal construction. It was decided that. Above all, the official style is a noun style, emphasizing stasis, inaction, rather than action. The official writer makes all his natural verbs into nouns, and then uses a form of to be, the weakest, most lifeless, colorless verb, so as to give the sentence grammatical completeness. Thus, this sentence needs an active verb, becomes this sentence is in need of an active.
So, we don't have time to listen to the whole thing, but if you do at home, perhaps you will benefit from it. Here, on the other hand, is just a short kind of example of a faculty member who's using.
Hi, I'm Britt Abel from German Studies. My favorite method for sentence level editing is called the paramedic method. It gives you a formula for cutting back on wordy sentences. Let's look at a sample. It seems to me that the watching of Write-Well videos is beneficial to the improvement of my writing. Step 1, we're going to underline the prepositions to me, of Write-Well videos, to the improvement of my writing. Step 2, we are going to circle the is forms. We've got one is right here, is beneficial. Step 3, we're going to ask, where's the action? Who's doing what? Strings of prepositions or is verbs can get in the way of figuring out what the main action is. We've got 3 actions here, actually. We've got watching, we've got beneficial, so there's some benefiting going on here. We've got improvement, so there's improving going on here. So now we're going to take one of those actions and put it into an active verb. The main idea here is improving, so we're going to go with that. We could just get rid of this and say Write-Well videos, improve my writing. Step 5 is we're going to start fast. We're going to get rid of this qualifier at the beginning, it seems to me, and then our final sentence is Write-Well videos improve my writing. Here are those steps again. Give it a try. Good luck and write well.
So, it does become easier once you,
This is a video
whoops,
to explain the paramedic method.
so using the paramedic method becomes kind of natural after a while, but at first it is a good idea to try to slow down and actually pay attention to sentences. I find that, I found that most of my writing in college was probably guilty of that bureaucratic kind of sound. And in fact, we often, as faculty, we often find really good students who have this tendency, because in order to write this bureaucratic stuff, you have to have a good vocabulary and you have to really understand all these sentence structures. Otherwise, you end up with run-ons and et cetera. And we're not talking about errors in sentences. We're talking about an approach to the style.
And your audience, right?
And your audience. So he ends up saying, try to get rid of the passive voice and instead use the active voice. And of course, sometimes the passive voice is totally necessary. And also sometimes because of the context, it's totally necessary and appropriate. And also because of the literal context within the sentence, it helps to be able to flip what's at the beginning of the sentence and what's at the end. And that's what passive voice can let you do. But before you can do that and make the choices, it helps to really know and understand what you're doing. So here's an example from this right place, revising sentences using the paramedic method. This is from a really awesome collection of things from a faculty member out in California. Circle all the to be verbs, i.e., because as he said, the to be verb is a pretty unvibrant thing. It does not tell us much. It is really powerful within syntax. Circle all the prepositions, because one of the things that happens is in this bureaucratic prose is we change all the verbs into nouns. In order to make a full sentence, then we have to add prepositions in order to link those nouns. So she was in her example, she was talking about is beneficial to the improvement of my writing, to the improvement of my writing. In order to, she took the verb improve and made it into a noun. And then in order to have a correct sentence, she had to add the preposition. So improve writing changed to beneficial to the improvement of my writing. So the prepositions are what allow you to link all those nouns. And actually, if you've done a whole lot of reading of academic papers, you start seeing an awful lot of these academic papers, like the scholarly research, like I especially see it in the social sciences. There's an awful lot of these nominalizations. Now, part of that is because of the fact that they are giving names to things. That's kind of what they do as academics. So in this paragraph is a demonstration of the use of good style in the writing of a report. So there are, for the circles are the prepositions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 prepositions in that short little sentence. And as you see, the prepositions are what link all these nouns in this paragraph of the user of good style in the writing of a report. And the only verb in the sentence, or functioning as a verb, is. So the revision is to ask, where's the action, or who's kicking whom? And the question is, who's kicking whom? So can anybody say who's kicking whom in this sentence? In this paragraph is a demonstration of the use of good styles in the writing of a report. So who is the agent, the person that's doing the kicking? Or that, not the person, but the entity that's doing the kicking.
The paragraph?
Yeah, it's the paragraph. And what the writer's done is change it into a prepositional phrase and taken the verb and changed that into a noun. And so you basically, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18 words in that sentence. So the idea is figure out who's kicking whom. So it's the paragraph. And then the question is, what's the verb? What's the real action? And I think they think it's demonstrating, which has been changed into a noun. How do we change verbs into nouns in English?
A gerund
just
phrase?
in this sentence itself, how have we changed verbs into nouns? How does demonstrate become a noun?
Is it a nominalization?
Yeah, it's called a nominalization, which was one of the videos I shared for Monday. They called them the zombie nouns. And I mean, those of you who took the history of English language saw that English is coming from German and it's coming from French. And French has all these ways of nominalizing. And so we take these German verbs and we add tion or ictiy, or, you know, there's a variety of things. Tion is the most common. And if you ever find a tion word, then usually you can find a verb hidden within it. Right on the page we see this. So where's the action? What's that? An action is a noun. What's the verb hidden within it?
Demonstrate or demonstrates?
Well, in the demonstrate, but up here at the top we have at the word action. What's the verb in the word action?
Act.
Act, right? Preposition, we don't use this verb anymore, but it's probably in the historical background. Revision is a word. What's the verb? The sion added to revise. Another ending is the IZE or the IZation. So, I mean, if you're making fun of things, you could say emphasization kind of thing. Another way to change a noun to a verb to a noun is by adding ER. So the doer is in the subject. There, it's clearly important. And another way to change a verb into a noun is to add ing and make it into a gerund. So what I would like us to do, we're not going to do, this is for homework. And this will be for everybody. So what I did on this page was click on try these exercises, and he has lots of them. And he also has answers. I would like you to, on the honor system, not look at the answers, but pick 5 of these sentences that he has 20 on this first page. Pick 5 of them and apply the paramedic method to it, and either put them in the quiz if that's what you're doing, or bring them to class on Monday. Or if somehow you're not coming to class on Monday, but you're also not taking the quiz, send them to me as an email. Is that clear what the assignment is?
Mhm.
So just quickly, because we're really over time, the decision was made by my boss yesterday. Circle the verb. What's the verb?
Was made.
Was. So I'll pretend to circle. Circle the prepositions. Where's the preposition? By.
Mhm.
Ask who's kicking whom? Who
The
did
decision.
what? Who is the primary agent? The boss. And what did he do? What kind of kicking did he do?
He made a decision.
Right. How can we change made a decision, which is taking an action and changing it into a two-word verb, really, which is made plus a noun. What's another way we could say make a decision?
Decided.
Yes. So my boss decided yesterday, blah, 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 blah. Now, again, as somebody have a question there? All right. So homework for everybody is to look at the exercises on that page, which is the first link on the screen. And I will include the screen, the slideshow in the course, in the unit. And there are 20 exercises on that page. If you click on exercises, and I want you to pick 5 and apply the paramedic method to it, and either bring it to class on Monday, or do it in the quiz if you're doing the asynchronous quiz, or send it to me as an email if neither of those apply. Questions? Jay, why do you look sort of like you're smiling?
Because class is over.
Okay. Okay.
No,
But
I'm just
the
kidding.
assignment is clear.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
Have a
Happy.
great, I guess it's time. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, and good luck on your new job, Colleen.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.